Let me see. All right, we are back at the record in file 24-21841-FC, People versus Dale Warner. We did over the lunch hour review a number of questions from the jurors, and it's my understanding at this point that there is, for the most part, there's an agreement on all the questions that would be asked. There's agreement on all but one question that will not be asked, and I'd just like to take a moment to read into the record the questions that will not be asked. The first is, could you reveal the amount of the life insurance policies? Was there an attempt to cash them in? If so, when? The second is, was there any significance to the amount of duct tape, the placement of the duct tape on the victim's body? Did the ME report that it could have been done to stop bleeding? The third is it sensible to say, with everything involved, it would be very difficult for a person not familiar with the farm to put Dee's body in a tank? The fourth is, was it determined if Dee was killed in the house? The last question that will not be read is, did you ever try to interview Jaron Warner? And was Jaron ever interviewed? And there was disagreement with respect to that issue. Ms. Wise, I don't know if you're going to make any record of what your position on that is. If you'd like to, you can go ahead.
Your Honor, I just believe that that question potentially opens the door for further questioning that we would like to explore. And I'd hate to mislead the jury by only allowing that portion of the question to be read. Oops, I didn't even notice. So while we would love to explore that issue, the court has placed limitations on our questioning on that. So, and we understand the court's position, so.
Okay, Ms. Chartier, is there anything that you wanted to make a record of with respect to that issue?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
All right, and just for clarity, the court's position is that those questions could have been asked with answers of yes or no only. However, the follow-up would have gotten us into an issue of assertion of the Fifth Amendment privilege, which I would not permit any questions about, because under the applicable case law, that would not be appropriate for presentation to the jury. Is there anything else that we need to address before we bring our jurors?
No, thank you.
I think we wanted to excuse officially some witnesses who are not going to be called. So by stipulation, I will read the names if the court is amenable to that right now.
Go right ahead. Cody
Ross, Deputy Gowans, Sam Everly, Dawn Everly, Dustin Reckner, Deputy Bailey, Daniel Ziegler, Mackenzie Smith, Jenica Bush, and Cameron Warner.
That all accurate, Ms. Wise?
Your Honor, Cameron Warner is still on our witness list, and we do not want to excuse her from the subpoena yet at this time. We would, however, stipulate to the release of the other witnesses.
I thought you were stipulating. Okay.
Okay, so with the exception of Cameron Warner, the witnesses just named will be excused.
Oh, okay.
Anything else?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
Do we want Detective Lieutenant Drury to return to the
we'll
stand?
come back to the stand, and I apologize, I need to restart the polygon.
Oh, sure.
Kick down halfway through the after.
Oh,
Can you sit down, Judge?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
You are in the meeting now.
Yeah. Should be all set.
Thank you.
Maybe see it. All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are ready to resume. Sure, you can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Lieutenant Jurior, my name is Mary Chartier. I think you know that because we've been in the courtroom together quite a bit on this case.
Yes, ma'am.
So I have some questions for you this afternoon. What's your current position?
I'm a detective lieutenant with the state police.
The Michigan State Police.
That's correct.
And we already went through this. You began working on this case in March of 2022,
Thereabouts, yes, ma'am.
and you were working again with the Lenawee County Sheriff's Department to assist them.
That's correct.
Then was your primary contact Kevin Greca?
Yes,
Then in August, specifically August 9th, 2022, you took over, meaning the Michigan State Police took over, correct?
yes,
And you were the officer in charge, is that correct?
yes.
Now, you referred to Detective Singleton as your partner. Were you peers? Were you leading him, directing him? How did that work?
By rank and job classification, we are peers, but in your words, he did work at my direction.
Okay. Now, when the case was transferred over to you, you received thousands of pages of documents, is that correct?
Yes.
And you organized and reviewed them?
Yes. In tandem with him. That was my hesitation. So, yes.
Did you have these items when you started in March, or did the bulk of them come in August?
Probably somewhere in the middle. So we had a lot of documents when we started assisting, but when we take over late summer, early fall, we then go and collect all the physical copies. So there may have been some things I didn't have yet, but we had the bulk of it by then.
And then you listened to prior interviews that had been conducted
Yes,
and watched those videos?
yes,
There were quite a few, correct?
yes, ma'am.
And then you conducted your own interviews, right?
Yes,
Uh, Reviewed the surveillance, you and in conjunction with Detective Singleton?
that's correct.
So if there was a piece of evidence in this case, you or Detective Singleton reviewed it and you were aware of it. Is that accurate?
Yes, there were other detectives involved also, but us two primarily.
Now, the missing items that you indicated of Ms. Warner's, I want to make sure what specifically is missing?
Are you saying what disappeared with her?
Yes.
Essentially, her go bag, her driver's license, her passport. There were some personal hair care products, and her phone.
Is the personal hair care, are you talking about like hairspray, curling iron, that sort of stuff?
Correct. I think there may be some makeup also, but I'm not positive on that.
And those items to this day have not been found.
Initially, one item, I think it was maybe the curling iron, was reported missing, and that was found within a few days. But with the exception of that, the other items have never been located. That's correct.
Where was the curling iron found?
I think it had fallen on the floor near like the bench near the bed, essentially. Like maybe in between, they found it a few days later, thinking it was gone, but it was actually there.
But the other items have not been recovered.
That's correct.
Now, there were extensive searches that were conducted by law enforcement, correct?
Yes.
Well over 3,000 acres.
Yes.
And those were done to look for Ms. Warner as well as her belongings, right?
Yes.
Now, when you are deciding where to conduct searches, what is going through your head in terms of like where you want the police to look?
Um, that is based off of training and experience of what are the areas that are most probable to possess and or develop evidence, essentially. That is something that would be roundtabled between the other detectives on the case.
So when you're looking, for instance, for the phone, the wallet, those sorts of things, is it fair to say that you're looking for areas where people involved in a crime would hide, conceal, or destroy evidence, and they do so in areas that they're comfortable with?
Yes.
And does that language sound familiar?
Yes.
Because you actually wrote that. So
Very eloquently.
it,
Yeah.
it's fantastically worded. And we talked about the searches were not just land, but again, all different kinds of waterways. You said small, essentially small inland lakes, ponds, creeks, rivers, that sort of stuff, correct?
Yes.
I want to talk to you about some of the searches, and there are quite a few, and I'm not going to go into them each and every one in detail, but I do want to go through the overview of the searches. So, Ms. Warner is reported missing on April 25th, 2021. On April 26th, 2021, Kevin Greca goes out to the Munger property, right?
Yes.
And then he searches the Munger home.
He walks through the home with Mr. Warner. Yes, ma'am.
Now, when you said walk through, is that different in your mind than search?
Yes.
How so?
If I were searching a house, I'm gonna open all the drawers. I'm gonna look under the bed. I'm gonna go in every cabinet. Versus a walkthrough is a more preliminary walk through the house. So the two, and I'm not trying to split hairs, but there is a difference in my mind.
So when he's walking through the house, though, while he is not opening up necessarily every cabinet, he is looking for things of potential evidentiary value, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And he also has a body camera on when he's doing it
Yes.
so that other people can see what he's doing.
That's correct.
On that day, he also interviewed Mr. Warner,
Yes.
and he also interviewed some other people that day as well.
Yes.
And to be clear, you would agree with me, Mr. Warner didn't have to speak with Detective Greca, correct?
No, he did not.
But he chose to do so, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So then on April 27th, 2021, I think we've established there were two searches of the property. The one earlier in the day was the consent search that was cut short, and then the evening one was via a search warrant. Would you agree?
Yes, on 427. Yes, ma'am.
427. I apologize. Did I miss the data?
No, I'm just making sure I'm on with you. Yep.
Okay. For April 27th, 2021. And on that date, if we combine both those searches, land was searched as well as buildings.
Yes.
And then we know that they had both cadaver and tracking dogs there
Yes.
and drones,
That's correct.
because we've seen some of that footage. Uh, Again, Mr. Warner spoke to the police that day, correct?
Yes.
Now, when he changed his mind with Detective Greca, you've listened to that audio and video, correct?
Yes.
And he indicated that he, at that point, thought Ms. Warner was at her son Zach's house and she would be returning and he needed to get back to farming. That's what he said.
A loose paraphrasing, but yes, ma'am.
Sure.
But
But
that's a gist of what he said. Yeah.
sure. Yeah, no, it's not a direct quote, but
Yeah.
that's the
You've been here for a while. I'm really busy. I got to get back to work. You guys got to go, basically.
now then there was another search on April 28th, 2021 of an additional property owned by Mr. Warner, correct? That's Cedar Point.
Yes.
And that was a consent search?
I'm not as familiar. I'm going to take you for your word on the date. I know that they eventually did a search there.
Do you want to see a report that will indicate the date?
I'm not arguing with you. If you want
Okay.
me to look at it, I will, but I'm just,
No, that's
I know
totally,
they definitely searched it that week. I'm just not sure on the date. Yeah.
that's great. And if at any point in time, it's a lot of reports, if you want to see it, feel free. So then on April 29th, 2021, there's another consent search of the Munger Road property, correct?
Yes.
And that had canines and drones.
I'm not positive on the drones, but I know there's a canine there. Yeah.
And also, that's when the surveillance system was checked and phones were retrieved.
Yes,
And Mr. Warner again speaks with the police.
that's correct.
There was another search on May 10th, 2021, and Mr. Warner consented to that.
I'm not certain where that search was.
That was to retrieve electronic devices, as well as Ms. Warner's mouth guard. Does that ring a bell?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And then he also consented for her dental records.
That's correct.
there was another consent to search on May 14th, 2021. And I'm not saying that there was a search that date, but Mr. Warner was asked to consent to a search of his properties and he said yes, correct?
I don't recall that one specifically,
Okay.
ma'am.
Would you pull up GAAZ01, page 39? Right on the right-hand side, about 1/3 of the way down.
Yes, ma'am, 519.
Oh, no, if you look at the top, it says 514. We'll get to 519 in a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry, the way it's laid out is confusing. Now I see what you mean. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
514.
So Mr. Warner had called and indicated that his properties could be searched, correct?
Yes,
Now, on May 19th, 2021, he again consented to a search of all of his properties, right?
that's what the report said. Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna object. Do you have any personal knowledge about what property he's consenting to, or is this all from reading the police report?
My personal knowledge is limited to what's in this report.
So Detective Lieutenant Druyer has testified extensively today, as well as when he testified on the first part of his testimony about what was done in the investigation as a whole. He indicated he reviewed every police report. I asked him about every video, every audio, and that is going to drive what happens in the investigation.
Oh, wait, that's fine, but he's saying he doesn't have personal knowledge of the answers to the questions that you're asking. And he can't simply read from the report. If you'd like to use the report to try to refresh his memory, I think you're welcome to do that. But that isn't what's happening here. What's happening here is he's just giving you answers from the report.
Okay,
And I don't think that's
Okay.
appropriate from an evidentiary standpoint.
Thank you.
so Detective Lieutenant Druyer, did you review this Lenawee County Sheriff's Department report?
Yes, and ma'am, you can just call me detective. I
Okay.
get the formality, but thank you.
Okay, so you reviewed this report, correct?
Yes,
Do you have any reason to believe that anything in this report is inaccurate?
yes.
Okay, so what?
After reviewing the report, we found that what was in the documents was not always a great representation of what occurred on body camera. So we actually went through and watched all the body cameras and did a loose transcription or synopsis of those events.
So would that be, for instance, a police officer might write something happened and then you're saying that was not backed up by the body camera?
Um, More often, it was that what happened on body camera wasn't completely or accurately summarized in the report.
So somebody had their body camera on and then whatever occurred, and then the synopsis did not match what was on the body camera.
If I can give you an example.
Sure.
So I went to this place on this date and I saw Jim Smith. When you watch the video and it's an hour long and they walked around and they went to get lunch and they talked about XYZ, that was more typical of what we saw.
So the report didn't put in all the details from the body camera?
That's correct.
And so it was really important for you to have the body camera so you could actually review it and get all that information.
That's right.
And so do you have issues with the searches that were conducted? So do you think some of them were written in the report that there were searches, but that's inaccurate?
From my understanding, if the report indicated that a search was conducted, that search was conducted. That's not to say I don't have issue with some of the searches, but the actual documentation of when and where they occurred is, from what I can recall, mostly accurate.
Did you rely on that information as you sort of set, because you're joining in May of 2022, and then in August of 2022, you're taking the lead on it, you and Detective Singleton. So are you relying on documentation of searches and knowledge of searches to sort of chart that path of what you're going to do?
Um, yes, another component of that was for some of those searches, there were state police personnel. And I knew some of those people personally, so I could more, in a way, accurately rely on what they said they had done,
Because they would have reports as well.
or just a recollection. of being here and searching that, etc.
So when I'm asking you about these searches, so I'll ask about this May 19th one. So May 19th, MS or Michigan State Police is involved in this search in 2021. Are you aware of that?
I know they did some in that time of the month, but I can't recall which search it was.
Oh.
Do you know where it was, ma'am?
Sure. So there were 8 properties involved, including a property for a man named Tom Nortley.
Is this, if I may, is this when they dug the manure pit? Okay, I am loosely familiar with that search. Yes, ma'am.
This is what was considered the large scale search, which went on for a few days.
Okay.
So are you familiar with that search?
Yes,
Okay, so if I ask you questions about that, would you feel comfortable answering those?
I can do my best.
Okay, terrific. And then is it your understanding that Mr. Warner consented to a search of his properties?
Yes.
Now, you were not involved in this large scale search,
No.
but you're aware that it occurred because at least some Michigan State Police members were, correct?
Yes.
Now, are you aware that the Paragon property was searched during this large scale search?
The north side, the area that we dug the following, is it the following year? Yes, that side was searched. And I'm pretty sure they had a cadaver dog there also.
Would you take a look at page 179?
In this binder, I presume?
Yes.
You're referring to the bait stamp number?
Yes, at the bottom.
Okay.
So if we look, it says Paragon property number 7. You're indicating that only the north part was searched.
That's my recollection. Yes, ma'am.
Now, if you flip that page over, it also indicates that the south side of the Paragon property was searched, correct? And that's about 7 lines down.
It refers to some people walking the field. Yes, ma'am.
Sure, and it talks about search the fence rows, grassy area, barn, and equipment, correct?
Yes.
The south side is ultimately where tank 34 was found, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, there was a search on October 11th, 2021 that the Michigan State Police were involved in. Do you remember that? Or is that something that you're familiar with?
October 21,
October 11th.
October 11th. Was that the search with the FBI, ma'am?
Yes.
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
And that was a multi-day search, correct?
Yes.
And sort of the same sort of, and this is where Agent Impala, I believe, indicated that he had searched 37 vehicles. It was a multi-day search. That's the search I'm talking about. And that was a large scale search involving multiple police agencies. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And as you talked about, there was digging, ground penetrating radar, all of those things, correct?
Yes. And to be clear, I was not a part of that search.
Sure.
Okay.
But you did review both the Lenawee County Sheriff's Department reports. I mean, I'm assuming.
No, I just want you to understand my hesitation. I'm
Sure.
trying to recollect on something I reviewed. That's all.
And I know I'm asking you about a lot of dates. So there were FBI reports, Lenawee County Sheriff's Department reports, and Michigan State Police reports. Does that ring a bell?
Those reports probably would have been limited to our canine troopers. I'm not certain we had any investigators there. I don't recall.
They were limited to the canines.
Okay.
Are you aware that Mr. Warner consented to that search of those properties?
I'm not familiar with consent or not on that one. I'm not certain. I believe the FBI requires a search warrant to activate their field team, but I'm not certain.
Would it surprise you that he did consent?
No.
And then that search, as we talked about, continued on for a few days, correct?
That's my understanding. Yes, ma'am.
And then with that, there were fields that were searched as well, right? So we're talking about properties in terms of houses and buildings, but the search also involved fields.
I don't recall what all was searched. I know the house was for sure searched and the vehicles, but I don't recall anything else specifically.
through the course of the searches, do you recall that there were cornfields and soybean fields searched?
I'm gonna object. He's already indicated that he wasn't present for those searches and so he doesn't recall them. He's just reviewed a document. Again, it's all hearsay.
I said through the course of the investigation, not just with that
Just
search.
so for clarity's sake, you're talking about all of the searches from the entire investigation.
Correct.
Okay, I think
Correct.
that's fair.
I missed it. I thought you were referring to that day, ma'am. I'm sorry.
No, no. So I said what we've been talking about. I asked about waterways and then I've been talking about buildings and the home. But through the course of the investigation, you'd agree with me that there was actually like land searched, fields, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Now, May 4th, 2022, there was a search of the Munger Road property, and you would have been involved at that point. Do you recall that?
Yes, ma'am.
And that included the outbuildings and the office building, right?
In the home. Yes, ma'am.
In the home. Thank you. And then on May 10th, 2022, there was another search of the Warner property, and Michigan State Police was involved with that.
Can you give me that date again, ma'am?
May 10th, 2022. This,
I don't recall what that search was. I'm sorry.
I might be able to refresh your memory. Was there damage to the Hummer during a search?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so tell
I
us
did
what
not damage the Hummer.
you did not, but tell us who did. He's already done testifying.
Yes. One of our computer crimes analysts got into the very large commercial sprayer and attempt to get some data from it and bump the handle. And if you could imagine a monster truck moving slowly towards a vehicle waiting to crush it, it's essentially what happened. So the tire grabbed the Hummer a little bit and crashed the back end. And to his credit, Mr. Warner wasn't angry at all, surprisingly so.
And so it's that search. So I thought that
I
might
was definitely there for that. Yes.
I thought that might refresh your memory. Mr. Warner had given consent to search, correct?
I'm not certain if we had consent. I feel as though if I was there, we wrote a search warrant.
You may have had a search warrant, but do you also get consent? You heard Detective Greca say that sometimes he'll get consent along with a search warrant.
In my professional opinion, when someone has revoked consent to search their property, I will get a search warrant moving forward, so there's no confusion. So at some point, he revoked consent to his properties. In my mind, I'm going to write a search warrant for his land moving forward. So I can't speak to what Greca did at that time.
Now, we talked about damage to the Hummer on that date. Were there other instances where there was any damage to the property?
Yes,
And what was that?
I can think of one in particular. I requested some digging be done by building number 7. Would you like me to point it out, ma'am?
Sure, if you'd like to.
On the side of building 7, we had a small excavator dig here. And between this building 7 and this, I'm not sure what they call this small structure, there was an electrical wire that we damaged during that dig. Just based on the machine digging through the ground. Aside from that, I cannot recall any damage as a result of a search warrant.
So just the Hummer and then the electrical wire, or do you count as damage the holes taken from the couch? So there were sort of cutouts in the couch in the living room that were circular. Would you count that as damage or?
Yeah, those items were damaged. Yes, excuse me. And that was during the FBI search in October of 21, if I'm not mistaken. But nothing else comes to mind other than those 3 incidents.
You had talked about a phone that Mr. Warner had gotten, and essentially he put Ms. Warner's phone number on that phone. He got a new phone and populated that phone, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware that he had asked permission from Detective Greca to do that?
Yes.
Then we talked about the searches that occurred in May. Were you present for the search of Ms. Warner's mother's, a home of Ms. Warner's mother, not where she lives permanently, but
Miss Warner's mother's?
Mr. Warner, excuse me,
sorry.
Mr. Warner's mother.
The vacant house that Clara owned?
Yes.
Yes, I am familiar with that.
Okay, so there was that search, and she was cooperative when the police showed up to search it, correct?
She was angry to find that we found a dangerous snake in the crawl space. Otherwise, she was perfectly fine with us being there.
What did you do with the snake?
I don't mess with snakes, so
So, Just let it go on its way.
That's somebody else's problem, unfortunately.
And then we already talked about there was the search of the lake. That was essentially a lake bed in June. Is that accurate?
Um,
There was June 2nd, 2022, and Michigan State Police would have been involved at that point as well as you.
that was a consent search from somebody otherwise uninvolved.
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Then October 28th, 2022, Mr. Warner again consented to a search of his property, right?
October 28th, 22.
Specifically a field.
October 28th of 22. He gave me consent for something in 22.
He consented to a field for his property to be searched. Would looking at a report refresh your memory?
Yes, ma'am, please. Oh, this would be October 21, ma'am.
Oh, excuse. Is it? That looks like an 8 to me.
Well, in 22, it would have been mine by then, so Lenawee County wouldn't have been getting consent for anything.
Okay.
But no, otherwise, I'm not familiar with this.
Okay. But if Lenawee County has consent to search forms in their report, you're not disputing that those are valid, though, correct?
I would have no basis one way or the other, ma'am.
Then there were also searches in early May 2023, and this was a multi-day search of lots of properties. Would you agree?
Yes, ma'am.
And this went on with a lot of people, correct? A lot of officers searching.
Yes, I think we had at least 120 personnel involved for 2, maybe 3 days.
And you divided it into areas.
That's correct.
I'm not going to go through every piece of property searched, but for instance, in area 1, you searched properties. By you, I mean law enforcement in Brooklyn and Onstead, and that totaled a little over 407 acres, right?
Correct.
And then there's no area 2, and that's just for administrative reasons, it sounds like. Area 3, properties in Onstead totaling 79.82 acres.
The totals are sounding accurate, but I couldn't tell you from memory how much land was in each area. I'm really sorry.
Would you like to either look at sworn testimony that you gave before or a police report?
I can tell you off the top of my head, it was roughly 3,000 acres that week that we divided into areas. But how much was in each area, I couldn't tell you from memory.
Well, let me ask you this. So I'll just ask you about the cities where these occurred. So there were 8 properties in Tipton. Does that sound right in area 4?
Yes,
10 properties in Tecumseh in area 5.
yes,
Area 6 was Leroy Seiler's property in Tecumseh.
yes, ma'am.
And that was the property that Mr. Warner went to spray on April 25th, correct?
That's correct.
Area 7, there were 8 properties in Onstead.
Yes,
Area 8, there were 13 properties in Tipton.
yes,
Area 9, there were 5 properties in Onstead.
yes,
Area 10, there were 3 properties in Tecumseh.
yes,
Area 12, there were 7 properties in Adrian Township.
yes,
Area 13, there were 4 properties in Madison Township.
yes,
Area 14, there were 7 properties, 3 in Tecumseh Township, 2 in Raisin Township, and 2 in Ridgeway Township.
yes,
Area 15, 1 property in Onstead.
yes.
There was also, I think you talked about a search in January of 2024, correct? Did you talk about that when you on direct?
January 24 or January 23, ma'am.
Excuse me, January of 2024. Was there a search in January 2023?
I'm sorry, give me a moment. So, I'm having a hard time differentiating the Januaries. I'm sorry.
So do you want me to see if this refreshes your memory?
Please.
It's when the John Deere utility box was swapped.
Yes, that's what I would call the reenactment with the front end loader, that search.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
So that's January, I believe, of 2024. Would you agree?
I'm sorry, I thought it was 23 at first, but I
Okay.
believe you. Yes, ma'am.
And then there was also later on in that month an excavation, correct?
Was that the excavation we discussed earlier?
Yes. Now, we already talked about vehicles were searched. That includes the JCB and the Kubota, right?
Those were searched by the sheriff's department. I'm not certain that we did anything with either of those vehicles. We utilized the front end loader of the JCB for the reenactment, but I'm not certain that we searched it formally.
Now, when you talked about the later search where you found the duct tape and paint cans, those sorts of things, you said you found those. You grabbed the paint cans off the shelf.
Yes,
Now, do you know when the paint cans were purchased?
I do not, no ma'am.
And what about the duct tape? Do you know when that was purchased?
I do not, no ma'am.
Anything, the tarp, anything like that?
No,
Did it surprise you to find Rust-Oleum white in a barn on a working farm?
no,
Did it surprise you to find duct tape there?
no,
Did it surprise you to find a blue tarp?
no ma'am.
Or I should say there were multiple blue tarps, correct?
At least two, yes ma'am.
And same with the drawers and with the stickers in them. You don't know when those were ordered, correct?
I do not.
You're finding them in 2024, and Ms. Warner had gone missing in 2021, right?
Yes.
And were those doors locked?
No.
Were the buildings locked when you were there? Did you need a key to get into every building?
On that specific search, I don't recall. In general, most of the outbuildings were unlocked. I'm certain there's a time at some point we needed a key for something, but most of the time things were open for us.
Just a couple of things that you had spoken about. You said you did a geofence and then the fog. And the geofence is essentially, you said, sort of putting a perimeter down on a location and then seeing what devices pop up, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember with geofence, what devices popped up?
I know there was more than one, and I think we attributed both of them to Dustin Lally.
And we know that Raquel Bach was on the property too, correct?
Yes.
But her device didn't come up.
No.
Now, do you recall were areas of the house swabbed for human blood?
I wasn't a part of those searches. I know that's you referenced the holes in the couch. That was primarily why that was done, to my understanding, but I wasn't present for the rest of that laboratory type of search. I couldn't tell you.
You don't dispute that it was done, you just weren't directly involved, is that correct?
I know that they definitely the chemical is called luminol. That's what you use to look for human blood in searching. I know that was deployed, but I'm not certain of where.
I wanna clear up a little bit about a, phone download, so I wanna make sure I understand. So Detective Hooper did a download of Mr. Warner's devices in April to May 2021, is that accurate?
Yes, his phone and iPad. Yes, ma'am.
And then Ms. Vanden Heuvel did a later download, and she testified on Friday, and that's the portable case that you're referring to, right?
I may have referred to both in my testimony.
Okay,
And she, her download kind of takes some explaining, if I may.
sure.
So initially, Detective Hooper from the Monroe County Sheriff's Department, he testified to what he did with Mr. Warner's devices. Um, a big part of what you can do with electronic devices depends on the licensing that your department or whoever you work for purchases. They're really expensive. So in our instance, we're fortunate that we have what I will call the A license. We have the newest technology, the Michigan State Police. At the time, Detective Hooper, no fault of his own, he had kind of the B license. So when we examined those pieces of information, the analyst, Danielle Vanden Heuvel, she took the original information that the Monroe County Sheriff's Office had and put it into our A license, if you will. But then subsequently, she also made someone from her office made the recommendation. You want to gather these devices again so we can put them all through that A license. If that makes sense.
So her work was from Detective Hooper's to to May, because that's what we heard. So essentially, if he did the download and looked at it in, let's say, early May of 2021, she's looking from May of 21 to May of 2022.
No, that's not necessarily true because the subsequent download that we conducted could also have data going back to April of 21.
Okay, so do you know if it did have I'm talking about from do you know if it had anything additional before April 25th, 2021?
Any data on the phone
Yes.
before that? Um,
And if you don't know, it's okay to say that.
I'm not certain, but I feel pretty comfortable saying that device would have had something from before April, some piece of information on it from before April.
Now the um indication where you said you asked for a phone and then Mr. Warner didn't really want to give the phone. He called a lawyer and then ultimately gave you the phone, correct?
I think I argued with you, yes, ma'am,
You did. You did.
and I got the phone. Just for
You
the
did get the phone. The gun safe or the safe you were talking about, is that a gun safe? That moving to the sprayer barn where you said you saw a safe in building 7 and building 5.
the safe that I
That
was inside of
yes.
those images. Yes, that's sold as a gun safe. Yes.
And was that ever tested? Did anyone ever swab that for blood, DNA, bodily fluids, hair, anything?
The closest to a search that was conducted on that safe is when the FBI was there in October of 21. It was still in Building 7. Mr. Warner provided a combination. They opened it and took a photo of the inside, but no other examination of the safe was done at that time.
At any time, correct?
No, but by the time I realized that it may be involved in some way, I was unable to locate it again.
And that would have been how many years later?
I wasn't looking for it in January of 22. I'm not sure the first time I searched for that independently. For that reason, if that makes sense.
We saw some videos of Mr. Warner speaking to the police. You would agree with me, he spoke to the police numerous times when Detective Greco was the lead on the case, correct?
Yes.
And even when there was the task force, he continued to speak to the police multiple times.
Yes.
And at that time, he had another lawyer. We saw him in the video named Lawrence Lieb. A lot of times, Mr. Lieb wasn't even present, correct?
Correct.
But Mr. Lieb was fine with Mr. Warner chatting.
Um, I'm assuming yes. I didn't have that communication with them at that time. That was Kevin Greca, but he never made statements to anything otherwise.
And he actually brought Mr. Warner involuntarily to speak to you in December of 2022, right?
Yes.
Now, while you talked about Jamaica, Mr. Warner was always adamant that he didn't harm his wife, right?
Yes.
Now, kind of going to that Jamaica interview, it was actually you who brought it up about 45 minutes into the interview, correct? And you said something like initially you made a statement about Jamaica. Why do you think she'd be in Jamaica, right?
Um, that sounds correct. I would have been asking him about a previous statement he made.
And then he explained why, right? He didn't just say, "Hey, I think she's living in Jamaica with the drug cartels," right?
When he went into the mystery man that she might have met on a cruise ship.
So, nope, this was when he talked about the fact, tell me if you need to
Oh,
refresh your memory.
I'm sorry. Can I correct myself?
Yes.
When he talked about how she was enamored looking up at the hills when they were on a vacation.
Yes, he said she really liked Jamaica, correct?
Yes.
And Mexico.
Yes.
When they were in Jamaica, she had befriended, he didn't use the term concierge, but he said the person at the resort who is able to kind of get you what you want, correct?
Yes.
And she saw mansions up in the hills, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And she thought that looked really beautiful and she'd wanted to go up there, correct?
Yes.
And she was told, "Don't do that. Those are drug cartels," correct?
Yes.
But Mr. Warner said she was still like pretty fascinated by it, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, in addition to the oh, and let me jump back. You described when it comes to Mr. Warner's statements, you described them as being fairly consistent, correct?
No, there was two things he was fairly consistent on. The rest were not consistent.
Okay. I'm going to show you a police report. It says investigated by Daniel Drury. It's an MSP report, page 21.
Which suburb?
And I'd ask you to look at the first sentence of the bottom paragraph.
You're looking at step 4, ma'am?
I am looking at sub 4, yes.
And can you tell me where to look again? I'm sorry.
Sure. Last paragraph, first sentence, correct?
Oh, yes, ma'am. I see what you mean.
So let me ask you, this is your report that you wrote, correct?
Yes.
Because it's got your name and it says investigated by, and sometimes there are two different names in those boxes, but yours is in both, correct?
Yes.
And you wrote Dale's initial statement to LCSO, that's the Lenawee County Sheriff's Office,
Yes.
which was fairly consistent over numerous contacts, was that Dee had a migraine in the late evening of 4/24/21, and then you go on to detail the statement, correct? You wrote that, right?
Yes. The context here is what I'm typing is fairly consistent over these, is what my intention was. So what I detail afterward was fairly consistent in his statements.
Sure. So what was consistent?
I would be reading it from here.
Okay, well, I'll ask you. Do you remember what was consistent?
The parts that were consistent was that they had some form of a disagreement. How he describes it does change over time, whether it was an argument or what it was. That she eventually got a migraine, and that she took some medication and got hungry, and had a little something to eat. She falls asleep. There's some discrepancy about where they fall asleep and if she gets to the couch or if he goes to bed. That does change over time. They fall asleep essentially. Where they sleep is again changes. He wakes up in the morning and leaves at 6 a.m. is the bulk of his primary statement. The timing of the morning is what starts to change over time.
Also, the other item that you indicated was consistent was that he had rubbed her shoulders, correct?
Yes, he consistently states that. Yes.
And nowhere in here, if I flip it over, do you write any inconsistencies, correct?
No, the intention of that paragraph was to highlight the portion that had been consistent up to that point.
So again, you don't write any inconsistencies.
Not in the specific paragraph, no.
Then you
I'm gonna object on the rule of completeness and ask you to be allowed to testify about all the inconsistencies that are contained within the report.
I-
That are detailed.
I'm asking about supplement 4 that Detective Dreyer wrote. There's going to be cross-exam or redirect, I should say. But that is the essence of his paragraph.
So I don't think the rule of completeness requires Ms. Charday to do that now. It gives you the ability to thoroughly admit that evidence during your presentation. So I don't think it's required right now.
Okay, I do believe the rule of completeness does require it to be brought in when the evidence is brought up, so as not to cause a delay in admitting the evidence. I'll allow her to continue and I'll bring it up on cross-examination redirect.
Well, how nice that you're going to allow me to continue. So this last paragraph only talks about consistencies. That's it. So
The argument seems to be over. So
Okay.
you can continue with that.
now there were hundreds of interviews conducted. You'd agree with me
Overall,
overall.
yes, ma'am.
And you talked about the importance of using a body camera to record interviews because then you were able to find discrepancies between what conversations had occurred and then what was summarized in a police report, right?
In some instances, yes, ma'am.
You'd agree with me, you didn't always activate a body camera, correct?
No, I did not.
And sometimes you would turn it off when the portion of the interview that you wanted recorded was done, and then you would continue speaking to someone, correct?
Typically, at the end of the interview, people would like to ask not direct question about an investigation, but more what's normal and what's going to happen next, those types of things. Sometimes those can become more personal, intimate, to like how a person's feeling. It's not always the most appropriate to record. So in those instances, it's common practice for me to turn it off.
What about at the beginning? Sometimes you don't turn it on right away, correct?
I'm pretty consistent about turning it off. I can think of one instance with a reenactment where I gave some direction before recording it, but for the most part, unless it's by forgetfulness, we try to have it on right away.
And there's no, do you record phone calls?
Not typically, no, unless I have a reason to believe there's going to be some evidence within that phone call.
What about text messages, emails, those sorts of things? Do you have all of them or have some of them not been preserved, I should say?
Typically, unless a text message or voicemail or email pertains particular pieces of evidence or any piece of evidence, then those typically are not saved. No.
Do you think it's interesting that, for instance, you looked at some Lenawee, I'm assuming it was the Lenawee County Sheriff's Office reports, and then when you matched it with the video, you were like, oh boy, the report doesn't give enough detail, but yet you don't record every aspect of your interview. So no one can go back and look and say, okay, so when you shut off that body camera, the 10 or 15 minutes you're talking to someone, we don't know what happened in that, right?
I could see why you'd bring that up, but my explanation um, stays the same when I'm discussing some intimate feelings that someone's having about a particular instance that aren't necessarily pertinent to the case, especially when those videos are going to be foiled by media and press potentially. I like to protect those people's intimate feelings if I can.
But you don't know someone's going to be talking about an intimate feeling, right? So someone doesn't necessarily say, I'm going to talk about my intimate feeling now, and then you turn it off. You turn it off and then answer whatever questions they may ask. Is that fair?
Well, typically when I turn off my camera, I'll ask someone, okay, that's the conclusion of the interview, and I'm going to turn this off now. And if they disagree, there's something they still need to discuss, then I'll keep it on. But otherwise, that's when it ends. At some point, it has to come to an end. We can't leave the camera on and recording forever.
No, it can't. But when you're still communicating with a potential witness, can you at least see why it would be helpful to have a complete video of the entire communication?
Not as opposed to what I've explained. No, ma'am.
Moving to the sprayer, you talked about the fact that you had essentially reenacted Mr. Warner's movement with the sprayer, and you matched it up with GPS information that you received from John Deere. Is that correct?
A combination of that GPS information and Dale Warner's statements of that morning. Yes, ma'am.
And then did you also, or law enforcement also look at the weather that day?
We had, and due to a few different reasons, we weren't able to completely recreate that, unfortunately.
But not a very windy day, would you agree?
There's mixed reviews on that. I wouldn't feel comfortable because I wouldn't feel comfortable commenting because I don't know with clarity.
Now, when you looked at, it sounds like you looked at all of the portable case download. Is that the correct terminology that you're using? Or
Yes, ma'am.
the phone dump that we kind of call it
Yeah.
locally? Okay, so you looked at all of that. You also looked at Mr. Warner's fitness data from April 24th to April 25th, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And that indicated that, I should say, that kept recording from roughly 7 p.m. I'm looking to 11 o'clock in the morning, right? That's an area that you had zoomed in on?
Um, that is an area I zoomed in on. I'm not certain I would say that it kept recording.
Well, it shows that he had a heart rate from 7 p.m. to 11 a.m., correct?
I don't feel comfortable answering that with a yes or no.
Okay, so would you show?
I can just explain. I don't think you need to show it.
Okay,
We
so so let me ask you if that's okay before you get to your explanation. It showed that Mr. Warner had a heart rate, correct?
yes.
So it showed the total number of readings, and to be clear, it breaks it down by hour, right? So 7 to 8 p.m., 8 to 9 p.m., 9 to 10 p.m.
There's more detail than that.
Sure, no, but when we're looking at the information you put in a police report, that's how it's broken down, correct?
I don't recall what information is in the report, but I know there's more detailed information in the portable case than that.
Okay, so let me show you what's in your report, if that's okay. It's on page 6.
Thank you.
So just want to make sure we're on the same page. So what you put in the report shows April 24th, for instance, 7 to 8 p.m., April 24th, 8 to 9 p.m., correct?
I think I've discovered the disparity and
Okay.
we're disagreeing slightly. So this specific report is when we were still aiding the sheriff's department,
Mhm.
and we were operating off of that kind of B license of the phone data. So the information I'm referring to that's more in depth was from that A license later on.
Okay.
So I think both things are true, if I may, ma'am.
Okay, great. So let's just talk about this information right now, if that's
Okay.
okay. So this shows a heart rate for Mr. Warner from 7 p.m. to 11 a.m., correct? So it's been recording that entire time, at least according to what was included in the report on March 30th, 2022, right?
Yes. This supplement shows that there's data from 4/20/4/21 starting at 7 p.m. and it collects data at minimum until 4/25 at 11 a.m. But there's data between those 2 hours.
Sure. So, and it shows essentially the total number of readings for a time period. So if we're looking at 12 to 1 a.m., it shows 23 readings, correct?
Yes.
A max heart rate of 67.
Yes.
Distance traveled says did not record. That means someone didn't move during that time. Accurate?
Or that it, for another reason, wasn't recorded, but more than
Okay.
likely they didn't move. Yeah.
And then
I'm
flight.
gonna object to speculation unless he knows about how the Apple heart monitor and heart rate and stuff work and can describe it.
Well, he just said it could be for another reason, but more than likely it's because no one moved.
All right, well, he answered, but I didn't know that there's a foundation for the answer, which is what Ms. Wise is channel.
Okay. So let me ask you this. You looked at this information and then you looked at later information, correct?
Yes.
Did you understand or learn about what you were reviewing?
Simply the data that was put out. I don't understand necessarily the science behind it from the
Oh.
device.
Right. Well, who does, right? I'm saying, did you understand the data that you were looking at? So, for instance, when it says distance traveled, did you understand what that meant?
Um, I understand that it's giving a distance, but again, I'm not certain how it comes to that conclusion.
Okay. No, I'm not asking you to figure out the algorithm. I'm just saying, so for instance, when it says max heart rate, do you know what that means?
Yes,
What does that mean?
that would be detecting the maximum heart rate detected at that time.
And what about distance traveled? What does that mean?
That would be how far the device had traveled.
And what about flights climbed?
I would be assuming, but I'm not. I'm
Okay.
assuming it's how many flights of stairs you climbed at a given time.
I mean, that seems pretty reasonable, correct? That it would be a flight of stairs.
Correct.
So if we look at this and we look at from 12 a.m. to 4 a.m., it recorded no movement in terms of distance traveled by Mr. Warner, correct?
Correct.
And then if we look at flights climbed from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m., it did not record any flights climbed, right?
Correct.
And then if we look between 4 and 5 a.m. for distance traveled, it says 1.18. Do you know what measurement that is? Is that in feet?
That's my assumption.
I want to just move on to a few other things. Um, we had on Friday an exhibit 195. There was a text message exchange between Ms. Warner and Mr. Warner. She refers to a man named Craig. Do you know who that is?
Craig is their marriage counselor.
Thank you. And also, there has been some discussion about Ms. Warner's love of jewelry. Um, would you agree she spent over $45,000 on her K Jeweler credit card from 2019 to April 2021?
Yes.
And did you look at any other records from K Jeweler?
Um, not anything that would change that. I also looked at receipts and things that supported that figure.
That's what I was going to ask. That didn't seem out of the norm, correct?
I just looked at that 2 years, so I'm not
Okay,
sure how to describe what normal is, but I know that's an accurate figure.
thank you. Now, we heard a jail call. People are notified that the call is being monitored, correct?
Yes.
And they can end the call at any time they want, right?
Yes.
The JCB reenactment that we saw photographs of, who was driving the JCB?
The one and only Detective Sergeant Mike Baker.
Okay. And then was he being directed? So was someone helping him kind of line up that JCB with the stairs as we go to the door?
Only to the point where he didn't want to hit the house.
How long did it take him to get that up there?
Mm, I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Do you remember 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, or just have no idea?
When you say get that up there, do you mean from the time he started it in the barn?
Yeah,
Um, 5 minutes, maybe. I'm kind of flying blind. I can't remember that far back.
sure. And that's all right. And do you know how fast he was going?
I couldn't tell you. No, ma'am.
Did he seem like he was going pretty fast or?
I'm not even certain I was there when he was moving it until he got close to the house. I can't tell you.
Now, even though you did that reenactment, there's no physical evidence on the JCB that Ms. Warner was ever in that front loader, correct?
No, no,
The-
it was processed, and there was no physical evidence located by the other agencies.
Now, we saw some video from April 25th, 2021, and you'd agree with me, there are roughly 17 cameras on the, not roughly, there are 17 cameras on the Munger property.
Um, I don't independently remember the number, but I don't dispute that there's a number of cameras.
Okay, we heard testimony at trial. You're not disputing if someone said
Yeah, I'm not playing
17.
coy with you. I just don't remember.
Okay, no, that's fine. And the cameras are motion activated, right?
Yes.
And so in the morning, Mr. Warner is on camera at a number of different times. And if you need to refresh your memory by looking at that report, please feel free. Does this sound correct to you? At 6:58 a.m.,
Yes.
7:13 a.m.,
Yes.
7:23 a.m.,
Yes.
7:30 a.m.,
Yes.
7:33 a.m.?
Um, my memory starting to get a little bit scarce, but I'm still with you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and if you need to look to refresh it, just let me know.
What-
Seven,
What
seven,
page is that on, ma'am?
it's page 141 and 142.
That's the bait stamp number?
Yes.
I see the page, but this is Scott Singleton's report, ma'am. I didn't write this.
Okay, well, did you look at the footage?
Yes, but I don't know it as intimately as he described here.
So do these numbers sound right to you or no?
Um, they sound right because I know Scott Singleton and this would be accurate, but I don't.
So you're saying you don't have an independent knowledge of that?
That's correct.
If Mr. Singleton is, or Detective Singleton, I should say, is saying that he saw Mr. Warner on camera at 7:34 a.m., 7:40, 7:41 a.m., you're not disputing that?
No, ma'am. I would expect these to be exact and thorough, but I don't have independent knowledge of that.
And then are you aware that Mr. Warner leaves the property at 7:47 a.m.?
But that's when he goes to Leroy Sealers, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken. Yes, ma'am.
And then returns back at about 8:11 a.m.?
Yes, ma'am.
Then he's on camera a little bit more at 8:18, 8:19, and then leaves the property again at 8:46 a.m. Does that sound right?
Yes,
And then comes back at about 11:18 a.m. in the sprayer.
that's correct.
Then he leaves the property at 1:48 p.m. and returns back at 2:18. Does that sound about right?
Um, I know he leaves and comes back. I'm not certain on the times.
And the surveillance video is in evidence, so if you don't know, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so and if you don't remember that,
I know he leaves about that time. I know he comes back in the early afternoon, but those times escape me. I'm sorry.
now, Ms. Saylor, would you please pull up snip A for me? This is from the fuel tanks on the property at 3:41 p.m. Nope, that's the wrong one. While Ms. Saylor gets that, and Ms. Vinsky, would you help her with that? Thank you. I'm gonna ask a few other questions for you. Okay, is that it? Terrific. Great. So do you know roughly who else was on the property at 3:41 to roughly about 4:12?
Man, this would be a question for Detective Sergeant Singleton. This is the cameras and the timeline. That's his deal.
Okay. Well, so let me ask you this. Did you watch this video? Did you see somebody plowing the field in the back?
I don't independently recall. I'm sorry, ma'am.
Okay, nope, that's fine. Did you ever ask Mr. Warner if he was plowing the field in the back?
Um, I don't recall.
Would there have been anyone else on the farm who would be plowing that field to your knowledge at that time frame?
Um, I'm not certain who else would have been there plowing the field. I have no independent recollection of that, ma'am.
Did anyone tell you, any employee who was there, I also plowed the field in the back?
I don't recall someone stating that, ma'am.
And so you haven't looked at the surveillance video to see the plowing of the field and then what it looked like after the work was done. Is that correct?
I've looked at the cameras. I'm not familiar with the plowing of that field. No, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Saylor. Now, I was a little confused when you talked about the welding theory. We heard Detective Singleton say it came up pretty soon, about in April of 2022. Is that your recollection of when it came up?
I know it was sometime that spring or summer, but I don't know exactly when.
And then I was also, so who came up with the idea? You or Detective Singleton?
Um, he was definitely the one that discovered that video, and we discussed it together. I'm not sure if he came to me and said, "Hey, I had this welding theory," or "Hey, check this out," and we discussed it together. Some variation of that.
Then who made the decision not to tell Detective Greca?
It wasn't an overt decision to not tell him. We just kept assisting. We didn't mention it one way or the other.
So you and Detective Singleton thought that Ms. Warner, you might know where she is, right? She might be welded in a tank somewhere.
I think to frame it that way is overestimating the confidence that we had in that theory at the time.
Did you, let me ask you this, did you or Detective Singleton follow up on tips from psychics?
Um, in a semi-joking way, Detective Sergeant Singleton was in charge of psychics.
And then you'd follow up essentially on kind of almost any lead if it might have even an essence of credibility. Is that accurate?
Yes, and I think I was being kind of funny, but the reason why we would, in a way, take psychic tips seriously is I can't remember the specific case, but historically, a psychic called in a tip, and it was really someone that was a witness and didn't want to say they were a witness, and that eventually led to evidence of a crime. So if it's someone that was framing themselves as a psychic called in a tip, I would always hear them out because they might know something and just not want to be honest about how they know.
More often than not, though, they don't know anything, correct?
That's accurate, yes, ma'am.
So what percentage of the time would you say those psychic tips are accurate?
If it's truly a psychic,
Yeah.
zero.
Okay. So knowing that you have this like very low percentage that a psychic tip is going to be correct, you still pursue it, right?
That,
General.
that's not even that. I wouldn't say pursue it. For instance, we searched a small private lake. A psychic had called in about this lake, and when I reviewed the property, it was connected to a piece of property of someone that Dale Warner was had a familiar relationship with. So based upon that, and it can't hurt. Let's go check it out. That's how I would pursue it typically. Does that make sense?
Sure. So what would be the problem? I was confused with saying to Detective Greca, um, boy, we've got this theory. Let's maybe brainstorm around it, talk about it, look into it.
The assignment of assisting the sheriff's department wasn't, I I don't want to be disrespectful, ma'am. I'm trying to choose my words carefully is my hesitation. It wasn't the most comfortable assignment. Um, there were people there that weren't always receptive to someone else showing up to look at their work. So my assignment at that time was to review what had been done and make recommendations about what had been done, not to present new theories or ideas, and I'm not certain it would have been received well.
Even if it hadn't been received well, don't you think it would have been prudent to at least offer it up, right? Because at this point in time, there is a missing woman and there is a family hoping to find that missing woman. So whether it's comfortable or polite or courteous, isn't it your job and Detective Singleton's job to say, listen, we've got this theory. And if somebody doesn't want to pursue it, that's on them.
Yes and no. Part of the apprehension at that time is, in my opinion, the writing was on the wall, and it was a matter of time before this case was ours full time. I felt pretty confident in that early on.
And then once it became yours full time, August 2022, why did it take 2 years for this welding theory to kind of take fruition?
It didn't.
Okay, so but you said you were only looking for things underground,
It's a mistake I'm not proud of. I was convinced it was buried, and that's where I was looking.
and
And I'm not proud of that, man.
no one thought, "Well, boy, there are other tanks not just on the Munger property, but at Carson, at Paragon, on other farms," right? We're talking about Munger, Paragon, and Carson. The reality is those tanks are all over the place, correct?
Which is why eventually I started looking for him. Yes, ma'am.
Sure. But okay. So you also indicated that you were concerned about a leak. Is that correct?
Yes,
Was that a leak at the FBI or was that a leak at the Lenawee County Sheriff's Department?
that was a U.S. Marshal.
Okay, so a US Marshal.
Yes,
Did that leak concern you before that family meeting in March with Greg Hardy, Billy Little, that group, or did you have concerns about that before?
um, it definitely wouldn't be before that meeting. I guess to characterize this, when we had the family meeting to introduce the fact that the state police was going to be helping the sheriff's department, I knew so little about this case. It was kind of embarrassing to be at the meeting, to be forthright with you. I'm not even sure if I had a copy of the report yet. So to have an opinion on anything, I knew nothing.
So you didn't have a concern about a leak before that family meeting. It sounds like. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, I had no reason to suspect that there was a leak going into it because I didn't know anything at all.
And then when did that kind of come your concern bubble up at that meeting?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was misunderstanding your question. Yes, because it's presented to me there, essentially.
Yes.
I misunderstood you.
So we
Yes.
heard Detective Greca talk about what happened. Tell us in your words what happened.
His recollection is accurate. Um, we wanted to get consent for as many phones as we could of people that could be involved or have any information on those devices. That was in a way uh, an objective of that meeting. And Greg Hardy did pull us out of the room, and his private investigator, Billy Little. That's when they had that dialogue about pretending to consent but not. Um, there were other people at that meeting that also did not consent to have their phones dumped. And much like Mr. Hardy at the time, simply because someone does not consent to something does not give me probable cause to type a search warrant and take it from their person. So um, we hadn't met a burden for that phone or other phones in the room that we could seize with a search warrant.
Did anyone else ask you to pretend that they were turning it over for a download, but not really download it?
No, ma'am.
So that was only Greg Hardy and Billy Little. And what was the rationale for that? You said it was a United States Marshal. What was the rationale for not like being concerned that someone would look at the phone?
Well, to be clear, what was presented to me at the time in that dialogue was that Mr. Hardy, I'm paraphrasing, but he says someone, and I can't remember how he characterizes it, but I remember at the time being clear of the fact that someone in some way involved in law enforcement is giving him information, and he doesn't want to part with his phone and reveal that source. There was no explanation of who it was or what information.
Did you know at the time it was a United States Marshal, or did that come up later?
No, that was something revealed much later.
It
When this dialogue is kind of happening in front of me, all of this is brand new information to me. I don't know Greg Hardy. I don't know anything about this case really. So all of this is brand new in that moment.
So Detective Greca, it sounds like, declined. That's what he said. He was not gonna play along with that.
That's
Is
correct.
that accurate?
That's correct.
And did you agree with that decision?
I do agree with it, but it wasn't. I mean, I would have done the same thing he did, but it wasn't my decision either. He's the one having this dialogue.
Right, and that's what I was asking, was if you were in that position, would you have done the same thing that he did, which said, essentially, "I'm not playing along that way."
I'm not going to play your game exactly.
When did the United States Marshal when were you able to kinda drill down on that and find out what was going on with that?
That is not something that I did personally. It was just information that was given to me at a later time.
By who? Do you remember?
Um, I can't remember if it was Kevin Greca or someone else at the sheriff's department. I can't recall. And that would have been some months later. I don't recall when it occurred either.
Now, I was a little confused about, um, so you had this welding theory, which was based on viewing the surveillance. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And then,
And if I may,
yeah, sure.
the Google search warrant in his iPad.
Okay. And the Google search warrant. So you had that come up in essentially 2022, sometime in 2022. And then what leads you to now say, okay, we're not looking underground, we're now going to look above ground?
Over the course of the next couple years, I felt we had exhausted every place to look above ground. I was extremely confident that she was not alive, and I was confident that some harm had come to her and someone had taken her life and that her body was hidden somewhere. And I could not think of another place that was reasonable to look above ground. I felt like I have completely, if someone brought to me a tip, I'm absolutely going to go look. But I felt like I had looked every place I possibly could above ground, and which brought me to thinking that we had never just looked for the tanks.
Did Mr. Hardy tell you, like, point you to a tank and say, "Go look for a tank," or this because it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like this was police work by you and Detective Singleton.
During the preparation that I discussed earlier about how I'm going to empty the tank and how I'm going to look in it, et cetera, during that planning, and then I get to the point where I need some knowledge about where Dale Warner's tanks are stored and how they're used. I had several dialogues with Greg Hardy at that time because he knew the farm intimately, his sister's farm, and he knew about their common practices and where they stored things. So over the course of probably a week, I've talked to him several times on the phone. And I've asked him about welding and I've asked him about tanks, and we're discussing that. And in one of those phone calls, he says, I'm paraphrasing, I wonder if she's inside of a tank. So he makes that statement to me. But it was after I had been asking him these questions. So I had been almost too forward with the information, but I needed to ask him these questions to get this information at the same time.
So you're aware that Mr. Hardy has made statements to the media, a lot of them, correct?
Unfortunately, yes, ma'am.
And do you believe all the statements he's made to the media are accurate?
No.
Specifically as it relates to the tank, have you told him that?
Yes.
And what about it is inaccurate that he is saying?
His characterization of events. He says, I can think of one interview in particular that's not based upon fact
And what is that?
regarding the tank.
What is that?
Which
Or
what is a statement or
what
what's
is
the
the
incident?
statement?
If I can just describe the interview to you, might
Sure.
be easier. Greg Hardy, in some way, consents or asks media to join him, and he takes a camera crew to Paragon Road, points in this barn, and states, "Look in this barn where the tank was hidden under cover of darkness," or something to that effect, which he would have no way of knowing that information.
And did he actually go on the property with the camera crew?
If my memory serves me correct, yes, ma'am.
And we visited that property last Wednesday. Um, so the barn, if we're on the south side, it's got no locks on the door, correct?
There is a chain wrapped around one of the handles. I'm not sure if there's a padlock on it or not. It wasn't locked the day we were there.
And so the day you were there, you just walked on, right? That there was no indicator of a lock.
Last week or
No, when you went to go find the tank.
in August.
Yes.
I think it was of similar to how it was last week. There may have been a chain wrapped around one handle, but it wasn't locked. I didn't have to force entry other than opening the door, maybe.
Now, with your communications with Mr. Hardy about the tank, and I think we've gone over this, you were on the telephone with him, so we would not have a recording of those communications. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
You had talked about sort of leading up to that point where you went and found the tank. You spoke to someone who had borrowed or been using some of the tanks on Paragon, correct?
Yes.
And the last name of Smith, does that ring a bell?
Was it Henry Smith?
Yes.
I couldn't remember earlier. Yes. Thank you for reminding me.
And he was interviewed.
Yes. I spoke to him on the phone, and I think one detective went to see him in person.
And was the issue there essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, he was able to go in, take maybe 10 or so tanks, pick out the tanks he wanted and use them. And you wanted to know essentially, do you have those tanks? Is that accurate?
Yes, I spoke with Mr. Smith on the phone, and he explained that at some point in the past, he had to store a bunch of anhydrous ammonia in a hurry and didn't know where to put it. So he contacted Mr. Warner, and Mr. Warner offered to give him or let him borrow, rent, however it was characterized. You can go take these tanks from Paragon Road. So my questions to Mr. Smith were, what tanks did you take? When was that? And do you still have any, essentially? And when speaking to him, I remembered that I had been to Paragon and saw tanks over there previously.
You talked about the fact that um the duct tape from inside the tank still was not dry yet, so you weren't able to do any DNA analysis, correct?
Yes, nothing inside of the tank was suitable for any DNA or print analysis based on the condition.
And that includes the tarp, does that include like the metal inside as well?
Correct.
When the tank was opened, was there a smell?
Yes.
And was the smell ammonia
Um,
or a chemical smell, I should say?
um, in a way, yes. There was other odors also.
Sure. And unfortunately, because the body was inside the tank, but we heard Dr. Cho say there was a strong smell of ammonia. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes. And to be clear, I think the reason why I misunderstood your question is Dr.
Sure.
Cho is referring to what's at the office as opposed to being at the tank. That's why I didn't understand you. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. You indicated that you had searched Mr. Hardy's property. When was that?
I searched, well, I don't want to use the word I too carelessly, that we searched Mr. Hardy's property. He has some land this direction going west that has a little pond that we did a consent search on. He gave me consent for, we had a tip about a rental house of his, so that someone had seen something of interest in the basement. We conducted a consent search there, and
Can I stop you? Do you
Sure.
recall the dates of these searches?
I don't. I could probably tell you what year that happened. That's about the best I can.
That'd be great.
So the consent search in the basement of the rental house, I think that was in Palmyra. Um, the spring of the prelim, would that be 24, ma'am?
That would be 24. Yes.
And I want to say that that field and pond was around the same time, but I'm not certain. And I think there's one more area he might have consented to, but I can't recall off the top of my head.
So the two searches of his property were a field and a rental property in 2024. Is that accurate from what you can best remember?
The sheriff's department had searched his barn, which is also down to the west, maybe a mile down the road. They had searched his barn.
Is that because there was blood found there and it turned out to be animal blood?
I'm not certain what led on the search there, but I know that they
Okay.
were there.
Okay. Any other searches?
Not that I can recall regarding Greg Hardy. No, ma'am.
Correct. And then we talked about him making statements that were incorrect to the media. Is it fair to say that the private investigator he had hired, Billy Little, he also made statements to the media which were incorrect?
I'm not certain he ever made statements that were correct.
Okay. Does that make your job significantly harder?
Unfortunately, yes, ma'am.
I have no additional questions. Thank you, sir.
Right, why don't we take maybe a 10-minute break? Since we're at a logical breaking point, so we'll do that. We'll come back and resume with the testimony. start for the discussion and we'll make a little series training. Maybe see. Okay, during the break, had a discussion with the attorneys and we have received 4 additional questions from jurors. It's my understanding that the parties are in agreement with all, that they will all be asked.
That's correct.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay. Are we ready to bring the jury back?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may be seated.
We've talked a lot about searches, whether it's consent or search warrants. Can you describe to me what exactly is a search warrant?
A search warrant is a document that an investigator, a detective, police officer would manually type. That document would detail that they are investigating a crime, what crime that is. It would detail that they want to search a certain place and what place that is. And it would have to detail what they're searching specifically for. And it would have to detail the probable cause necessary to search those areas. So for instance, if I had an eyewitness that said one of you were involved in a hit and run crash and they wrote down your license plate, I go to your house and I see your car parked there, I could reasonably articulate that your car was involved in this crash and I have to search it for evidence of that crash and what those pieces of evidence would be. Depending on the county that you're writing that search warrant in or that jurisdiction, some counties like a prosecutor to review it, some do not. Either way, a judge or magistrate has to sign it to give you that authority.
Now, Ms. Chartier asked you about the defendant consenting to searches of multiple properties over the course of many years, correct?
You're referring to Dale Warner?
Correct.
Yes.
And he consented to searches of all of his properties, except for on what date?
Except for on 4/27/21.
Okay, and what happened during the course of that search?
When the drone team and the K9 team showed up,
Well, objection, because I don't think that Detective Dreyer was present on April 27th, so it wouldn't be from personal knowledge.
This goes to his investigation and why he focused it the way he did,
I think there
the
was
next steps he did.
Okay, so again, the issue is personal knowledge. So what it goes to doesn't address the personal knowledge issue. So the challenge is that he doesn't have foundation, personal knowledge to testify.
So, based on the one search that the defendant revoked consent, um, did you do anything additional? Such as watching the body cams or surveillance or Drone.
yes, based on the fact that he revoked consent during that search, once the tank was discovered, we revisited those videos, body cam videos and drone videos to try and reconcile where that tank may have come from and where it was.
Okay. Going back to all of these searches and the condition that Dee Warner's body was found in, would you have expected to find her body even on April 26th, 2021, with all of the items that you had to help aid in your searches?
Objection, speculation.
I'll lay a foundation. How many homicides have you investigated?
Dozens.
Okay. Have you used canine?
Yes.
Which type of canine dogs?
Both article dogs and cadaver dogs.
Okay. What do you know about the extent of what those dogs can search for?
Those are tools I use regularly, and I have a strong base of knowledge for what they're capable of.
Ground penetrating radar. Have you used that before?
Yes,
And what's your knowledge on ground penetrating radar?
I understand to a point the science behind it and the best way to deploy that tool also.
You talked about FLIR.
Yes.
What do you know about FLIR?
Similar to ground penetrating radar, I understand to a point the science behind it and the best way to deploy that tool when necessary.
Drones?
The same, ma'am.
Excavating?
The same.
Based on your training and experience and the condition Miss Warner's body was found in, would you have expected to find her even on April 26th, 2021?
Objection, still speculation.
I believe he's laid a sufficient foundation for he knows the facts of this case as well as his prior training and experience.
I would overrule the objection. I don't think it's speculative.
Could you re-ask the question, ma'am?
Yes. Based on your training and experience and the condition that you found Miss Warner's body in, would you have expected to find her even on April 26th, 2021?
No.
You discussed on cross-examination that the defendant purchased a separate device, a phone, to place Dee Warner's iCloud on. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And that was April 29th, 21?
I know it was shortly after her disappearance, but I'm not sure the exact date, ma'am.
Okay. And do you have personal knowledge of what happens when you place an iCloud on a device that was previously used on another device?
Yes.
What happens?
Depending on the settings that you have in your iPhone, um, depending on how you set up your iPhone, is going to dictate what information is uploaded to the cloud and when, and how often those things happen, and if it's encrypted or not. Those factors, and primarily those factors, are what's going to dictate what you can retrieve from the cloud for an iPhone device. So in this instance, when that phone was purchased and her Apple account credentials were entered into that phone, everything that was on that phone at a particular date was then re-put onto that phone.
Would the device that previously had that iCloud connected to it continue to receive phone calls or text messages?
No, based in the manner in which that phone was activated. So in essence, not only was the iCloud information put on it, but also a line of service was installed from Verizon itself. So now anytime someone called that phone number or sent it a message, it would be going to that new device. So hypothetically, even if her device that she possessed on 4/25/21 would miraculously turn itself back on, it would not be receiving service from Verizon once the other phone was purchased.
You discussed May 2022 search where some electrical wiring got damaged on the Warner property. Is that accurate?
I remember speaking of that search, but the date escapes me.
Okay. And was that because you were doing digging, you said?
That's correct, with a small excavator.
All right. What happens when you damage someone's property while you're executing a search warrant?
That in part is why we take photographs before we start, when we find something, and as we're leaving, after we're done with the search, so we can document the condition of items like that. In that instance, and instances that are similar, the state of Michigan would be responsible for repairing the damage to that property.
You indicated on cross-examination that the JCB and the Kubota were searched by the sheriff's department prior to your involvement in this case. Is that accurate?
I know the JCB front end loader definitely was. I can't recall if they did like a forensic search of the Kubota or not.
Okay. But you weren't present for any of those searches, correct?
That's correct.
Do you know what was done during any of those searches?
I do not.
By the time that you came up with the theory on the JCB being involved, did you follow up and do any forensic evidence with the JCB?
The day that we did what I call the reenactment with the front end loader at the house, where you saw it pulled up to the house with the bucket extended, we had an evidence technician with us who did some swabbing at other parts of the property. He examined the bucket, and it had been clearly used so many times, and we had been so far since the incident had occurred that there was nothing to collect out of the bucket or the front end loader itself.
Dale Warner spoke to Kevin Greco multiple times throughout the course of the investigation, correct?
Yes.
And although we've seen a snippet of those interviews, would it be accurate to say that Kevin Greco did a lot of the talking?
Yes.
Hours worth of body camera footage?
Yes. Hours and hours.
During the course of your interview in December 2022, you asked the defendant about Dee being in Jamaica or Mexico. Why did you ask him that?
He was making statements to numerous people that was his belief at the time.
Okay. And how strong was he that she was in Jamaica or Mexico when he made these statements?
He seemed to be convinced that she had taken money from the business and that she escaped to one of those places.
We talked about the short paragraph in your report where you indicated that some of the defendant's statements were consistent. Is that
Yeah.
fair? Okay. Did you also notice inconsistent statements?
Absolutely.
Okay. And which statements were those?
Over the course of his multiple contacts in the coming weeks following her disappearance and in our interview, there were numerous items that were inconsistent with his statements. One of the most glaring ones was he initially states that he leaves the house around 6 a.m. and has gone farming. And it's not until someone notices the front end loader tracks leading up to the house from the JCB that he then recalls that he had to come back. His initial statement is that he comes back and looks in, he says, and she's sleeping. He then later states that he came back because he forgot something and re-entered the house and sees her still sleeping. The particular item that he collected also changes on several occasions. First, it was that he forgot to feed the dogs, and then it was that he forgot his tool, and eventually says that he forgot his piece of paper in the house. From there, there are numerous times that he changes the sleeping arrangements that night. Initially, he states that they both fell asleep. He falls asleep on the floor, so does she. He puts her on the couch, and then he returns to bed. That changes a little bit over time, but the most dramatically when he interviews with us, and he states that they both slept on the floor all night, and he sleeps on the floor every day. That was a big inconsistency. There was also inconsistencies about the amount of money that was missing from the house and the businesses and when he discovered that. Initially, he states that he's learning of it as it's happening and he's discovering it over time, but there was evidence to dispute that and show that he knew for some time that there was some extra spending coming from the businesses on her behalf.
In his initial statement to on April 26th, did the defendant indicate that that's why they were in fact going to see Craig, the counselor that you testified about earlier?
That's correct. That they were seeing the counselor because of the, I'm paraphrasing, but the money dishonesty or Dee Warner spending or something to that nature.
And then when he interviews with you, does he act like this is all brand new information?
When he interviews with us, he's stating that as he keeps looking into it more and more, he's discovering the money that she's been taking from the business.
In the beginning, what was the defendant's statements on how long Dee Warner would be gone?
That changes over time. Initially, when he meets with the sheriff's department, he says she'll be back in a couple days. And as a couple days come and go, it's a few more days. And as a few more days come and go, it's a week. and then a month, and then 6 months, and then he stops making any mention of when she'll be back at all.
Do you recall what length of time, or strike that, do you recall what he indicated to you during your interview in December 2022 about not being worried about her being gone?
I don't recall, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Do you, I'll come back to that. During the course of the interview, the initial interviews, Dale Warner consistently says that he has a conversation with Dee about like selling the business and businesses and being done with the businesses. Do you remember that?
Yes, he makes reference to that several times.
Okay. And during the interview with you in December of 2022, he makes mention of having discussions with Dee Warner about the grandkids.
Yes, he essentially states that, now looking back, I realize she wasn't done with me. She's done with business and she wants to be with her grandkids more often.
And did he in fact say he had a conversation with her about staying home and watching the grandkids during that argument?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. First time you heard that?
Yes.
We discussed Greg Hardy and him allowing you to search his properties. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And the fact that he wouldn't allow you to search his phone during that family meeting at the sheriff's department. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Did you ever seek a search warrant on Greg Hardy's phone?
No, both Greg Hardy and the others at that meeting at the ninth consent, I did not have sufficient evidence or probable cause to get a search warrant for those devices at the time.
After you found Dee Warner's body, did you return to the home to look for evidence of the homicide in the living room, in the bedroom, anywhere?
We did return to the farm. Um,
Let me be specific.
I
Any physical DNA evidence?
No, we did go back into the home, but uh, typically for a homicide, in this case was no different. The lead investigators are present for the autopsy with the medical examiner, so they can see for themselves the injuries, they can discuss them with the doctor, and they can get a better feel for if there was an instrument involved in an injury, for instance. In this instance, we were confident that the injuries did not result in any external bleeding. Therefore,
Correction. That's not what Dr. Cho said. So I don't know who he's saying we were confident. I don't know who we is.
All right.
Dr. Cho testified that he didn't, it, the injuries didn't necessarily mean that she bled out. That
Okay,
there were,
that's different than what Detective Greer just testified to. And I think the criticism is that he's using the term we, and we don't know who we is.
okay. Can you rephrase?
yes, in reviewing the injuries with Dr. Cho and having an understanding of the previous searches in the residence that did not reveal the discovery of blood within the house, we were confident that if we went back, we would not find it because it likely was not there.
Again, I know you indicated you didn't search the JCB when you went in January of 2024, but after you found her body, did you attempt to look for the JCB again?
No, for the same reasoning.
The items that were seized by the FBI in October of 2021, the journals and the loose leaf pages, after you found the tank, did you attempt to send those journals and the tag from the tank to the lab?
Are you referring to a handwriting analysis?
Correct.
No, I did not.
Okay, why not?
A handwriting analysis to match one person's handwriting to a known sample. You have to have a library of comparison statements. So, for instance, if I were to write, I'm sick and want to go home today, the people that do that evaluation at the lab would require a volume of that same thing written over and over by the person that you're suspecting of doing it. And in this instance, because that would be coming from Mr. Warner, who wasn't cooperative, uh, there would not be a value to that type of evaluation because you'd be forcing him to write these same things, and he would know it's for comparison value.
Okay. And
Additionally, because of the volume of items that he had written within the journals, we had a witness identify his handwriting from the journals, matching the handwriting on the tag that was on the thing.
I'm going to move to strike that last statement as it would entail hearsay. We don't know who this witness is. They didn't come and testify in court.
that simply went to his state of mind on why he didn't send it to the lab. If the court wants to strike it, the court can strike it, but it just goes to his state of mind on why he didn't send that item to the lab. Not hearsay.
I think it's permissible for the non-hearsay purpose of explaining why it was not sent to the lab. It's not permissible for the truth of the underlying matter that the two handwriting samples matched.
When you are involved in any type of investigation, but specifically a homicide, when you find the body, why do you send it to the medical examiner?
The medical examiner and the autopsy are going to be crucial for the homicide investigation as they're going to give you a cause and manner of death. For instance, I've been involved in shooting investigations where you believe someone was shot twice, but when you get to the autopsy, you find out they were shot 4 times with 2 different caliber bullets. That changes the direction of the investigation. So the body of a person has copious amounts of evidence when you're investigating a homicide, as it did in this instance.
What about a person's cell phone?
Yes, a person's cell phone in general is an extremely valuable tool in investigations. In this instance, Dee Warner's cell phone would have had a library of information on it. For instance, she regularly wore an Apple Watch, which would have been collecting health data. Therefore, if we would have had her phone, it would have told us a more precise time that she would have died. Additionally, her phone would have showed if she had any communication leading up to anyone or attempted communication leading up to her alleged disappearance.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to move to publish People's Exhibit 234 so the jury can see the duct tape from the tank for themselves. have nothing further.
Detective Dreer, when you were talking about the second phone where Ms. Warner's data was moved to, when did you say that was purchased?
Um, I don't believe I set a date, ma'am.
Okay.
I know shortly, sometime after her disappearance is when it went into service.
Do you want to look at a report to refresh your memory? It was the fall of 2021.
Sure.
Okay.
Ms. Dillard, do you want to use my copy?
Thank you, ma'am.
Mhm.
Page 16, I presume?
Yes, it's got the little sticky note on the side.
Yes, it says here in the fall of 21.
Okay, does that refresh your memory?
Yes, sorry, I was verifying for a separate reason. Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you. And then you indicated the police didn't even try to swab that JCB, the front loader, correct? In terms of the Michigan State Police at any point in time.
That's correct.
Now, you indicated that Detective Greca did do a lot of talking in the interviews with Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner didn't just sit there silently, though. He also would talk back, correct?
And can I revisit the last question, ma'am? I want to
Sure.
make sure I'm clear. So, my evidence technician, while doing other work on the property, evaluated the JCB and found that it wasn't suitable for that type of evidence collection. I just wanted to be clear. Sorry.
Were you present when that happened?
Yes.
And why was that?
Just based on the length of time since the disappearance, and you could see recent wear and tear and debris within the device itself.
Now, again, going to Detective Greca's interviews, you said he talked a lot during the interviews.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Warner didn't just sit there silently, though. He also talked back, correct?
Yes.
I mean, we've seen a portion of those during the course of the trial. You'd agree?
Yes, ma'am.
And you'd also agree there were probably 30 plus phone conversations and meetings between Detective Greca and Mr. Warner, right?
I would have no way to quantify those, but I know they spoke on the phone.
Pretty regularly.
I'm not sure how often. I know that they talked on the phone a reason. I'm not sure how to articulate it about how frequently or not.
Sure. So if you could tally up in your head, how many interviews do you think there were?
In person,
Sure.
between Kevin Greca and Dale Warner,
Yes.
at least 6, if not 10.
So somewhere between 6 and 10. And then do you know how many phone calls?
I I couldn't tell you how many phone calls. Probably at least that many, an equivalent amount.
Now, you said that you never asked Mr. Warner for any sort of handwriting comparison where he would write the same sentence over and over again. Um, I guess, or you didn't even try, right? You said he wasn't cooperative, but the reality is you didn't even ask him if he would do it, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you also used the term we when you said blood would likely not be there. Who were you referring to as the we? Was that you and Detective Singleton?
Yes, in response to information we learned from the medical examiner, Dr. Joe.
Now, your interview with Mr. Warner and Mr. Lieb, that was in December of 2022, right before the holidays. Is that accurate?
Yes,
And then Ms. Warner went missing on or about April 25th, 2021, correct?
yes.
Would you expect every detail of a memory to be the same from April of 2021 to December of 2022?
Every detail, no, but if my wife went missing
I'm
abruptly,
not asking about what you would do. I'm asking, as a police officer, would you expect when someone is talking about something multiple times in a year at that point and roughly 8 months later, would you expect the narrative to be exactly the same?
the narrative, yes,
You wouldn't expect any difference in detail.
there would be variation to detail, but the narrative would remain consistent if it was truthful.
Sure. So a consistent narrative, but details would be different. I mean, I think that's what you
Yes.
just said,
Yep.
correct? And then did Mr. Warner ever tell you, his memory isn't always the greatest?
Um, he, I wouldn't deny that he's told me that, but I can't think of a particular time that he would have said that to me.
I have no additional questions. Thank you, sir.
I just have two questions. The device that you seized in May of 22 and sent to the lab, um, is that the device you were indicating the iCloud was placed on in the fall of 21? Does that make sense?
The device that I seized in May of 22 was the device that Ms. Shardy refreshed me on from the activation of the fall of 21.
Correct.
Yes,
Do you know,
that's my belief. It's my understanding.
okay, do you know if between April 29th, 2021 and May 2022, when you seized that phone, if there was another phone in the interim that had that information on it?
Between 4/29/21 and when I seized it?
Correct. Do you know if there was a separate device that had that information on it?
No.
Okay. The conversations between Kevin Greca and the defendant, sometimes did they discuss fishing?
Yes.
Did they discuss hunting?
Yes.
Did they discuss Canada?
Yes.
Talk about camping?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just a lot of stuff, right?
Yes.
Okay, nothing further.
When you were doing your interview with Mr. Warner and Detective Singleton, was there conversation about or jokes about your wife, what she would allow you to do, what she wouldn't allow you to do?
Are you gonna tattle on me?
I am hopefully she's not listening to this. and
I'm in
that
trouble. I
She's
can
in
tattle,
work.
yeah.
Right.
But
But
yes, that's accurate. Yes,
you
ma'am.
engaged in that same sort of banter, so to speak, correct?
Yes.
Maybe to a lesser degree than Detective Greca, but still existed, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. No additional questions.
Nothing further.
Okay, we have several questions from jurors. The first is, did you ever do any tests for blood in the house, bucket for JCB, spray barn, safe?
Some testing was done initially by the FBI in the fall of 21, but by the time we got involved, we did not observe a need to do so.
Okay, follow-up question, I think you answered, but I'll ask it anyways, is if yes, did any of the tests come back positive for blood?
None of the tests that were done in the fall by the FBI came back positive.
Okay, this I think has already been answered as well, but was the writing on the tag, on the tag on the tank determined to be in Dale's handwriting?
Yes.
Did you check the black box on the Hummer to see if it was turned on and moved on Sunday morning?
Yes. I can explain if you'd like, Judge.
I will leave that for the attorneys to follow up on. if they want to. Were you ever concerned that Kevin Greca may have had more than a professional relationship with Dale Warner, such as a friendship?
No.
What was the device in question used in tracking heart rate, distance traveled, and stairs climbed in reviewing data collected?
Those questions were in reference to Dale Warner's Apple Watch that he wore on his wrist, and a combination of some data is collected from your phone in addition to that.
Was the duct tape on Dee's body, along with the duct tape on the outside of the blue tarp she was wrapped in, also black in color?
Yes.
Is it common for an officer to remove his body cam and continue an investigation?
I would have a hard time answering yes or no to that question. There's some variables there.
Why didn't the Google search of liquid cremation flag your attention and only the other Google search about disposing a tank?
That search also piqued our interest, but when we were referring to the disposal of the tank, um, we were referencing that being very early in the investigation and what kind of supported our welding theory. So the cremation search also was something of noteworthiness to us, but that was not discovered until sometime later. The search itself wasn't discovered on the device until later.
Is there proof that Dale went to Findlay, Ohio on the weekend of Dee missing?
Yes, he went to Findlay, Ohio on 4/24.
Okay, that is all of the questions. Ms. Wise, do you have any follow-up questions that you would like to ask?
You indicated that you did something with a black box on the Hummer.
Yes.
What black box are you talking about?
The black box is a common term used for a portion of the computer in the car that police or other investigators may use if the vehicle is involved in a crash or accident. In other words, if in a separate unrelated example, if you were to be in your vehicle and collide with another vehicle, the black box is very likely to contain the rate of impact, if you're wearing your seatbelt, if you applied the brakes, some information like that. Some more advanced models also have some additional data. In this instance, we reviewed the specific Hummer in question with the person from our department that specializes in that type of information extraction, along with other information extraction from vehicles. And unfortunately, we were unable to obtain any data from the specific Hummer based on how old it was.
And I believe that you already answered this question, but I just want to follow up. As far as after you found Dee Warner's body, were you able to locate that safe that was in the spray barn?
The specific safe that I observed on the property, I never found again, which is why I found a similar make and model elsewhere.
The Dale Warner's Apple Watch that we talked about earlier,
Yes, ma'am.
I believe when Ms. Chartier pointed out to the section of the police report where that data was that limited data that you were given by the Lenawee County Sheriff's Department?
Limited, especially in comparison to what we received later on.
Okay, and describe what you mean by limited.
Going back to the type of extraction that was done from his device with that, the metaphor I gave about the B level license, when we later did it with that A level license, I was able to get more in-depth data for those hours that she was referencing.
Okay. Did you do anything additional with that data?
Yes, I evaluated the more in-depth data. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you did that independently, not with any assistance from anybody with Apple or a doctor or anything like that?
That's correct.
You indicated that the defendant went to Findlay, Ohio on April 24th, 2021.
Yes.
Okay, and he didn't spend the night in Findlay that night, correct?
No, he went in the afternoon hours with an employee to pick up a truck and returned home. Um, and then goes about his evening chores when he arrives home for a moment and is in passing with his daughter Lena as she's leaving. So he's home well before that.
You were asked about body cameras and if it would be common to take off your body camera when you're doing certain things. And you indicated that's not a yes or no. Can you describe what you mean by that?
The use of a body camera is can be very dependent on the circumstance and situations that you're in. So, in my current role, I'm executing more high risk search warrants on a regular basis, where there could be uh, there's a more likelihood of violence at the search warrants I'm executing. So you typically are going to keep your vest and your body camera on for a longer period of time. Separate than that, if I'm engaged with someone, a suspect or a witness or a person of interest, I'm going to remain with that body camera on also. That's not to say that there haven't been times where you secure a scene, the risk of harm to you and others has now gone down, everything is safe. It's not uncommon for police to take their vests off, and our policy supports the fact that we would no longer wear our camera. And through that, sometimes a neighbor or another person will wander over and start speaking with you, so those may not be recorded. But the use of a camera, it's very fluid and dependent on the situation. You want it on for every time you're going to have contact with people that might say something that's a point of interest, absolutely, and you should try your best to do that.
Nothing further.
You said that the FBI had, I want to make sure, conducted testing of the home swabs, the Munger property in the fall, correct?
The fall of 21, yes, ma'am.
Fall of 21. Is it your understanding that the Lenawee County Sheriff's Department did that at the end of April in 2021 as well?
I don't know that to be true, no, ma'am.
Did you review any report that indicated that?
I could be wrong, ma'am, but I don't recall any.
Would looking at a report refresh your memory?
Yeah, yes, please.
Again, I'd like to know his basis of knowledge if he wasn't there with the sheriff's department and he's just reviewing reports, his testimony would be hearsay.
So this does go to the investigation. He's talking about the FBI doing this testing and swabbing in the fall of 2021. The fact that if he knows, if the Lenawee County Sheriff's Department did it in the spring of 2021, it certainly would go to, is there a need to do it again? Because two different agencies have done it.
The objection wasn't relevant. It's at any rate, she's just asking at this point to see if she can refresh the recollection. So I don't think we're at the point where the objection would be appropriate. It's a foundational objection, not a relevance objection. I don't think there's any issue with trying to refresh the witness's memory, so she can do that.
There's also a lab report if you would like to see that as well.
Which report are you looking at?
Number 3.
Ms. Chartier,
Mm-hmm.
this is property item entry. This isn't really indicative of a report.
So I wanted to see if that refreshed your memory and if looking at a lab report on that item would refresh your memory. Would you like to look at the lab report?
It does not refresh my memory, and this is not indicative of the search that you're referring to.
Okay, would the lab report you think refresh your memory?
If the lab report is only referencing this, then it's not going to refresh my memory. No, ma'am.
So I just want to make sure, looking at a lab report with swabs from the house would not refresh your memory.
You can show it to me, but if it's referring to this specific thing right here, this is not indicative of a search that you're referring to.
Okay, so if it's not going to refresh your memory, we don't need to go through anything
Okay.
further. So your understanding is the first time the house was swabbed from your memory was in the fall of 2021.
I'm referring to the use of that chemical known as luminol to search for blood and canvassing in an area. Yes, ma'am.
And if anything happened before with the Lenawee County Sheriff's Department, you just don't remember it or you're not aware of it. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you. No additional questions.
Nothing further.
Thank you, sir. You can step down. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's about 1/4 now, so it doesn't make too much sense to try to start any new witnesses. So we will excuse you for the day, and we will come back, return tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you. I had I told you else, I wouldn't forget. During the trial, do not read, listen to, or watch any news reports about the case. Under the law, the evidence that you consider to decide the case must meet certain standards. For example, witnesses must swear to tell the truth, and the lawyers must be able to cross-examine. Because news reports do not have to meet these standards, they could give you incorrect or misleading information about that might unfairly favor one side. So to be fair to both sides, you must follow this instruction. Thank you and have a nice evening. Okay, is there anything at this point that we need to address outside the presence of the jury?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you then. We will resume tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.
Sergio.